Not all psychopaths are in prison. Many of them are in CEOs and boardrooms. This society rewards people that behave that way.
How does narcissism manifest as a protective mechanism for a person?
In other words, you'd have to be president of the United States. And he wasn't born like that. He was born a tender infant, like we all were. But then he had a certain childhood in a home that his niece, who's a psychologist, married Trump, and she says that the grandfather, Fred Sr., was a sociopath.
If you had 10 days with Donald Trump to resolve any past traumas, what would you prescribe to Donald Trump?
What's really interesting is that
Dr. Gabor Maté, thank you so much for being here again.
pleasure.
Why do you feel, so there's something, a book I've heard you reference as well from, I think her name is Bronnie Ware, the top 5 regrets of the dying. And the top regret was, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me.
Yeah.
Why do you feel it takes people so long to come to that realization in their life? Why is that so scary to live a life true to yourself?
I used to work with palliative care, working with dying people, and dying certainly concentrates the mind. And Bronnie Ware is an Australian woman who wrote this book called Top 5 Regrets of Dying People. I met her actually last year. I was speaking to her in Australia, and we had lunch, Bronnie and I, and she worked with dying people as well. And she wrote this book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And the number one, as you say, was, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself and not the life others expected of me. And the second one was, speaking of work, I wish I hadn't worked so hard.
Work so hard.
And they missed so much of life. And the third one was, I wish I had the courage to express my feelings rather than to try and please others. And so on. And
I wish I'd let myself be happier, and I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends.
So that's right. That's right.
I wish I'd let myself be happier.
That's right. And when people die, look, I've just turned 82, and I'm thinking of dying, you know, and I don't have a disease that I'm aware of, you know. I'm active and I feel well, but I'm starting thinking it's not going to last forever. I mean, you know, you never know that it's going to last forever, and you never know when it's going to end, but you get to a certain age, you start thinking about these things. And the thought of death certainly concentrates the mind on what's important. And nobody on their deathbed wishes they'd been to the office one more time, you know. Now, however, when you look at the formulation, I wish I had the courage to be myself, I don't agree with the formulation, because these people are still blaming themselves. They still think there's something wrong with them. I wish I had, in other words, they accuse themselves of lack of courage. In my view, and I've written about this in a number of my books, When the Body Says No and The Myth of Normal, it's not a question of courage. It's a question of programming. These people got the message. This goes back to your very first question to me. People got the message very early that they're not acceptable the way they were with their emotions and how they were. So in order to survive, and the child doesn't have much of a choice in the matter. He has to belong. She has to attach. She has to connect, be held. Otherwise, they don't survive. So if they have to suppress themselves in order to be acceptable to the adults in their lives, then we'll suppress ourselves. That'll have all kinds of consequences for your mental and physical health later on, as I point out in my books, but it's not a question of courage. It's actually an adaptation. So when people say to themselves, I wish I had the courage, they're not being kind to themselves, because it wasn't a question of courage. That's how they survived, by not being true to themselves. The problem with the early adaptations is they were necessary maybe in the first place to maintain your sense of belonging and connection and being cared for. But then those same adaptations turn against you. You're living in Miami right now, and you go to the beach and you do your deep diving, and I don't know what you're wearing, but the bathing suit. But if you're transported to Alaska in the winter and you wear the same clothing, you would die. So that which is adaptive in one environment is harmful in another. So that adaptation of suppressing yourself, which helped in childhood for you to belong and to be acceptable, will kill you later on. But it's not a question of courage.
People could hear this conversation or read one of your books or see an inspirational quote or something of the sort, and I think it can feel good in the intellect and in the mind, and suddenly, that makes sense. And then a reactive situation arises and kind of the core of the iceberg and your subconscious comes back online and the survival patterns come online and the trauma-based patterns come back online.
Yeah.
How does a person begin to actually truly heal psychological, emotional wounds? How do we begin the process of that?
How do we begin this? First of all, you have to recognize the fact that you're suffering. I'm suffering. It's got to start with that. If you don't think you're suffering, you're not going to look for help. And the way we are as human beings, we have to experience a lot of the time something unpleasant to make us ask, well, what's going on here? And does it have to be this way? So the first question is, am I suffering? Secondly, am I curious as to why? Do I think this is just life and I'm just fated to suffer like this? Or is there some reason that I can possibly learn and possibly change? So there has to be a curiosity there. It's got to start with that. And you're quite right, Aaron. Understanding things intellectually doesn't get you there. I've always said about myself that if intellectual understanding were to be healed, I would have been healed decades ago. But it doesn't work like that. Because trauma and the wounding happens in the body, nervous system, in the organ. So it has to be healed to the whole organism. And intellectual understanding is an important and useful aspect of who we are, but it's not who we are. It's got to go much deeper than that. And that takes work. That might take spiritual work and I would say emotional work as well. Certainly will take somatic work, something that you're familiar with. You work with the body a lot, and I'm sure when you work with the body, with people, you'll notice or have observed that certain body parts or body positions will evoke all of a sudden a whole lot of pain in people and emotional memories because they've been holding it there. So it's got to be worked through the body.
Yeah, it seems like my experience with therapy, it seems like there are aspects of myself as a young person that have been frozen in time. And if there are moments where I wasn't able to, I didn't realize it at the time, I was just doing my best, but I didn't feel resourced enough or safe enough or just understand how to allow the pain of that moment to pass through me and express it out. And instead I kind of stuffed it down. Yeah. I feel as though in my experience with therapy, every one of those stuff downs in my life is a freeze. And now my body keeps on forming beyond that freeze. But now suddenly there's like the Jung quote of, until you make the subconscious conscious, it will control your life and you'll call it fate. And it seems to me like now it's like the availability, your invitation to go back and revisit those aspects or moments in time within my life where I needed to cry a very specific cry or feel a very specific way, and I didn't allow myself the permission to do so. But the physical body keeps forming beyond that.
I totally agree with you, except the one phrase that you just used.
Yeah. I didn't allow myself. Allow myself, yeah.
Not that you didn't allow yourself.
I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel safe too.
You feel safe to do it. That's totally different.
Yeah.
The environment didn't allow you, or at least the environment gave you the sense that you better not. Now, human kids are born with all these emotions, or brain circuits wired for emotions, from anger to grief to joy to curiosity to playfulness, fear, and it's a need of the human infant. It's an evolutionary determined need of the human infant to be able to experience all those emotions when life evokes them. And if you get the message that you better not, then you won't allow yourself. But it's not a question of you not allowing yourself. It's the environment allowing it. So that you freeze because you had no permission to be yourself, to express yourself. There's nothing wrong with you having pain as a 3-year-old. As I said before, the 3-year-old or 4-year-old is eating an ice cream cone, it drops in the mud. They're going to be upset. They should be upset. They are going to be upset. Nothing wrong with that. But what if the parent says, stop whining, think of all the starving children in Africa? Then all of a sudden, the child's upset is not permitted. They're told that there's something to be ashamed of if they're upset. So it's the lack of permission. And that's a trivial example, but it's that lack of permission that creates the freeze.
Does a person need a therapist, or need an ayahuasca, or need a darkness retreat, or need a big intervention to be able to touch on these deeper imprints or wounds within the self?
Most people do. We were hurt in relationship, and so healing usually happens in a relationship. Now, everybody's different, but most people need some context where there's a sense of safety. If that's a therapeutic relationship, that's great. If it's an ayahuasca ceremony properly done, that's great. Have you done a darkness thing?
I did a darkness retreat. Yeah, I did a 5-day in Oregon, Sky Cave.
Yeah, I've had that invitation. Tell me, should I go? What's it for you?
I think it's one of the biggest boulders I've tossed into my pond, I would say. Like, they had the greatest ripples for the longest time, much more than ayahuasca, and much more than Vipassana, and much more than a lot of things that I've done, I would say.
Curious, what did you get from it?
It did something to me in a more passive homeopathic type way, that it left like a recurrent rippling of opening me up to emotions in a way that I just didn't, wouldn't have known to notice previously, but I would be much more emotive to everything. I would cry at movies more. I would cry at a sunset or a sunrise. I'd cry at seeing like the beauty of seeing a little child in a person's face as an adult. I would, it was just a lot more emotiveness. It was like almost like it helped me like come alive in a way.
I'd like that very much. I'd like to be able to cry like really. And trouble is, I'm afraid that I'd sit there in the park and just be bored to death for 5 days.
That's the point, Yeah. That's like that. Who said the thing along the lines of like that's the biggest issue with man is their inability to sit alone with himself in a room, something along those lines of like that's like if you're able to actually sit with yourself. It's the same thing in Vipassana meditation. It's like don't do anything. Don't journal. Don't do yoga. Don't do breath work. Don't do 4-7-8 breathing. Don't do box breathing. Literally just be, and the internal technology of your body and your internal higher self, it can handle everything. You've just been so busy trying to fix things that you're actually in the way of your internal intelligence. And I think that if you can be with that space, inevitably everything that needs to come up will come up in the perfect order. It's almost like a process of like beginning to trust God in a way. Many people I think are stuck in the doing, and in a way you could maybe extrapolate that back out of like, I don't trust the world, I don't trust the universe, I don't trust God, and if you can kind of sit down and just allow for 10 days or 2 days or whatever, I think it starts to unravel whether you like it or not.
The invitation to do this darkness thing is sitting on my inbox. It's been there for months. Okay, I'll consider it. Thanks.
Consider it. Scott's very good. We did a podcast conversation afterwards as well.
All right.
Does a person ever clear themselves of, I know you've been asked this question before, but does a person ever clear themselves of quote unquote trauma within their bodies?
Well, That's not the issue for me. Because I'll tell you, I'm 82 and I haven't. Not in the sense that I could be fully in the present moment and not have past programming impact how I react to things in life or to people or in my marriage. But I'm a whole lot faster than I used to recognize when that old imprints show up, and I'm a whole lot faster in letting them go, So whether you get to perfect healing, where it's all gone and you're pristinely in the present, yeah, that can happen to some people. I haven't met any, well, maybe I've met one. And it wasn't through therapy, it was through a big spiritual awakening, which I haven't had, So to me, the question is, it's a continuing work of clearing, but each step leaves you more liberated. And I would not want to be, well, I've said this often, but I'm 82 now, and I'd not want to be as young and stupid as I was when I was 81, So it's an ongoing process.
Do you have any regrets in your life?
Yeah. Sure I do. One of them is I wish I hadn't worked so hard. And like those dying people. And I wish I had seen my children more for who they were, rather than through the prism of my own expectations and projections and traumas. I wish I'm married to this beautiful woman for 56 years. I wish I could have always appreciated her love and her beauty, rather than having complaints and dissatisfactions and fantasies of something different. These are all, if you ask me, is there regret? Yeah, there's regret. No. But you know what? That's life too.
Why do you feel you stopped yourself from feeling all of that in your relationship? And
I'm just reading these days every morning when I wake up. I don't turn on the cell phone. I go to the computer, make my cup of coffee, and I sit down with the Bhagavad Gita. And which is a powerful. I don't buy into beliefs of reincarnation and past lives, and that just leaves me completely dry. But there's a lot of spiritual, psychological truth in it that I find inspiring. Now, one of the things they talk about is that the mind has different layers to it, you might say. So there's our discernment, intellectual discernment, the body. Then there is chitta, which is our awareness. Then there's manas, which is our memories and our impulses and unconscious and so on. And then there's ahamkara. And aham means I and kara means maker. So ahamkara is the I maker. It's what we identify with unconsciously. So when I look at, and that's what drives most people's behaviors. And we think that we're behaving this way or that way for this reason or that reason. Actually, it's what we identify with. So if I identify with it, going back again to your first question, if I identify with an inadequate sense of self, then I always want more and something different, because nothing's ever good enough. So that's for me, why? Because of my identity, my I maker, my unconscious sense of who I was, which was one of inadequacy and missing something and needing more and having to be bigger. That's what drove it, I think.
What's up, guys? I want to take a moment and share a word from our sponsors. We are sponsored by this delicious longevity gummy referred to as Timeline. So Timeline contains a supplement called urolithin A. This is the #1 doctor recommended urolithin A supplement. What it does is it helps for you to renew your mitochondria. They're known as the powerhouse of your cells. If you feel drained, if you feel sluggish, if your recovery is not that great, urolithin A is a supplement that can be supportive with the renewal of healthy mitochondria for you, so you feel more energetic. It's good for your longevity, it's good for your recovery, etc. If you want to try these delicious, this is the, what is this, strawberry flavor. They're genuinely very good. You're only supposed to eat 2. I usually eat like 4 to 5. Hopefully that's okay. Then you can go to timeline.com/align30 and you will get 30% off of your order. That's timeline.com/align30. If you want to try Timeline yourself, the link is in the description. I think you guys will enjoy. Who are you?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I do think it's better asked than answered. Because any answer I give you would be an intellectual response, and it would not be. If I give you some formulaic, spiritually informed answers, I'm a soul waiting to be born, or, I'm a particle in this vast universe, or I'm so-and-so, and I'm a retired medical doctor and author and speaker and so on. But none of that covers it, So I think it's a question that's better asked continually rather than answered. And there's actually a spiritual teacher you probably know about, Ramana Maharshi, and he would always ask people, "Tell me who you are. Just who are you?"
Yeah. Who was thinking the thought?
Yeah. So my answer is that's a great question.
Where does trauma show up in the body outside of everywhere? What is at the root of disease from your perspective?
Well, so trauma shows up everywhere. It can affect which genes are turned on and turned off. Like it can turn on cancer genes, turn off protective genes. It can cause inflammation in your blood vessels. There was a study, which I quote in my book, The Myth of Normal, where the amygdala is a almond-shaped little structure in the brain, which is a fear center. It's where you register fear. It's like the brain's alarm bell, the amygdala. And it also holds emotional memories. Now, what this study showed, now you can measure the resting state, like when there's no alarm, when there's no danger, that's the resting state of the amygdala. And this study showed that the more active the resting state of the amygdala is, the more chance there is of heart disease because of inflammation in the bone marrow and the arteries. So the resting state, the higher the fear level in the amygdala, the greater the chance of inflammation in your cardiovascular system. Now that resting state is potentiated by trauma. It shows up in your hormone levels, so adrenaline and cortisol, or your gender hormone levels. It shows up in the nervous system. Where does it not show up? So trauma can show up in all these places, and it shows up in certain behaviors. For example, we talked about the top 5 regrets of dying people. And the first one was, I wish I had the courage to be myself. Well, suppressing yourself, as I've shown in a couple of my books and a lot of studies have shown, actually suppresses the immune system. So it shows up in behaviors that further show up in your physiology. When you suppress your immune system, you get prone to 2 kinds of diseases. One is malignancy, because the immune system is not as capable of, for example, people who smoke, this has been studied, people who smoke and suppress their emotions are much more likely to get lung cancer. And the more they suppress their emotions, the less smoking it takes to trigger the lung cancer. So, or can show up in autoimmune disease. Because when you're repressing your emotions, like anger, which is a boundary defense, I mean, if I were to behave aggressive towards you right now, I could do that, Aaron, on the line because you couldn't. If I was in person with you, which I've been, I don't think I'd be very aggressive, given that you're 3 times as big as I am.
I'm sure you'd outsmart me somehow.
And didn't you press bench me once? I think you did. Part of a healing. Anyway, so but online, if I were to be aggressive towards you, and you suppressed your response, your healthy anger, which is just says, stop it, you can't. And if you did that habitually, that anger, which is a boundary defense, is part of the same system that the immune system is. So when you're suppressing your healthy anger, you're also suppressing your immune system, and the immune system can turn against you in the form of autoimmune disease, which is why 80% of autoimmune disease happens to women. Because women are more than men are taught they can't be angry, And so I have a chapter on that in The Myth of Normal, but there's a new book coming out that I just endorsed. It's called something like, actually, let me get you the title if I could. It'll take me a second because I just wrote the blurb for it 2 days ago. Okay, book's 26. It's called
This is my education on exhalation, patience, and all things are perfect as they are.
The book is going to be called Autoimmunity and the Good Girls. Okay?
Yep. That sounds about right.
And it's coming out this year. And it's just about what I just said, about the people that develop autoimmune disease are these people that suppress they're so nice and they're so good. And that suppresses the immune system and turns it against them. And I've been saying this for 25 years. And there's lots of proof for it. Which also means, by the way, that when people develop an autoimmune disease and they start to connect with themselves and find their healthy anger and learn how to say no, they can actually heal. And I've seen that over and over again. I've seen people get better with lupus, with rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, because the mind and the body can't be separated. So when you make these changes on the mind, emotional level and behavioral level, that'll affect your physiology in a positive sense. So what I'm talking about is not just theoretical, it's actually practical. If you're one of these people that's always very nice and I'm afraid to be myself and I have to suppress my emotions, and you learn how to be yourself, that can heal your body significantly. I've seen that over and over and over again.
How does narcissism manifest as a protective mechanism for a person, from your perception?
Well, narcissism, basically, they all go through a narcissistic phase as infants. They think it's all about us. And we never learn that there's other people. At that phase, we don't know that there's different individuals with other perspectives and other opinions and other emotions and other needs and other personalities. We just think it's all about us. I mean, think of a baby. It is all about them. I mean, all they have to do is be hungry and somebody will feed them. They don't have to say anything. Well, hey, it's all about me. Now, if your needs are met, and if those needs are satisfied, then you can start maturing past that phase. But if they're not, you get stuck in that narcissistic phase. So there's a man who said that the world is a horrible place. It's a dog-eat-dog world. Everybody's against you. Your friends want your house, they want your wealth, and they want your wife. Now, Aaron, if that's what you believe, how are you going to have to be in the world?
Yeah.
I'm asking you, how are you going to have to be?
Cold, hard,
aggressive,
individualistic, potentially aggressive, probably lots of muscles, lots of armor.
Selfish, suspicious.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, you'd have to be president of the United States. Because it was Donald Trump that said that in his autobiography. And he wasn't born like that. He was born a tender infant, like we all were. But then he had a certain childhood in a home that his niece, who's a psychologist, Mary Trump, who's the daughter of Fred Jr., Trump's older brother, who drank himself to death. And Mary is a psychologist, and she says that the grandfather, Fred Sr., was a sociopath. And the mother was completely incapable of protecting her kids. So that person gets stuck in that narcissistic phase where it's all about him. And look at it. He has to name everything after himself. The Kennedy Center, the Gulf of Mexico, airports, railway stations. What a weak sense of self he must have to need that kind of external affirmation all the time. That's a supreme narcissist. So it needs the need of being important. When you didn't get the sense that you were, then narcissism will give you the sense of being important. When you were dominated, narcissism will give you the sense of dominating others. So that's what, and I'm not talking about political policy now. I'm talking about a personality.
If you had 10 days with Donald Trump, and the intention was to resolve any past traumas for him to come to in a complete place of equanimity, ease, peace, graciousness, fulfillment, stillness within himself, what would you prescribe to Donald Trump?
Well, what's really interesting is that in the Myth of Normal, I talk about both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, and they both had highly traumatized childhood. So when the Americans voted for one or the other, they had a choice of which trauma would they rather see in the White House. Both traumatized, both cut off from themselves, And both interestingly said, in different words, that I'd rather not do therapy and look into myself too much because I'm afraid what I'd find. They both
Comedians say similar things sometimes as well. I don't want to lose my funny.
Every comedian I know is deeply traumatized.
Yeah,
that's what they all have ADD, but that's a whole other subject. But somebody like Donald, I wouldn't say anything to him unless he himself asked these questions. Like, as long as the world is working for him and meeting his perceived needs, and people are kowtowing and they're respecting and they're honoring and they're naming things after him and praising him. I mean, Mike Pence, the previous vice president, he said the most obsequious thing I've ever heard a human being say. He said to Trump, "Thank you for granting us the privilege of having you as our president." Now imagine needing to hear that. How little you must actually think of yourself unconsciously if you need to hear something like that. And imagine being that obsequious to utter a phrase like that. But as long as people are uttering those phrases and he gets to do what he wants, and he's the one who said that when you're powerful, you can grab a woman by the pussy and nobody's going to say anything. He gets away with it. So as long as he gets away with it and his ego gets larger and larger, he's not going to ask for help.
Well, what if he did? If Donald Trump comes to Gabor Maté,
there's nothing I can say to somebody who doesn't ask for help. And Yogi Berra said a great statement once, amongst his many great utterances. He said, "If the people don't want to go to the ball game, there's nothing you can do to stop them." So if people don't want to find out about themselves, there's nothing I can say to them. Now, if you wanted to find out, that'd be easy.
What would it be? He wants to find out.
Well, then I'd say to him, like I say to anybody, well, why do you want to find out? what hurts and what you're missing. We'd have a conversation, and it would very quickly emerge how best I could help him. Nobody's beyond help, by the way. Nobody, as long as there's consciousness. But there has to be a willingness and an opening and some vulnerability. And the problem with narcissists is vulnerability. They keep escaping from it. That they could be hurt, that they have wounds that could be touched. That's anathema to them. So in order to maintain their sense of agency, they have to keep hurting others and dominating others. And, well, there was a professor here at the University of British Columbia, where I live in Vancouver, who studied psychopathy, and he said, not all psychopaths are in prison. Many of them are in CEOs in boardrooms. And this society significantly rewards people that behave that way. Like, let's say that if you killed one person, the police would come and get you. But if you were the president of a sugar company that conspires to sell sugar or make people addicted to, if you're president of a food company that conspires to find out which combination of sugar, fat, and salt is most addictive, which, by the way, has happened. There's a book called Salt, Fat, Sugar, where the journalist shows the conspiracy of the food companies. And if you kill 1 million people because of diabetes and heart disease and other consequences of junk food and obesity, you're a hero, and you get recompense in the billions. So this society rewards sociopathy. That's the problem.
What's up, y'all? I want to take a moment and share a word from our sponsor. This podcast is brought to you by Kaizen. Kaizen is by far the cleanest electrolyte company that I have come across. They care so deeply about every individual ingredient that goes into these packets. They use microplastic-free pink Himalayan sea salt. They use organic flavors. Mixed berry is by far my favorite. It's insanely delicious. It tastes like you're eating or drinking real food. Sometimes electrolytes, they have like a weird metallic battery-esque type taste. This tastes like food. Tastes organic, it tastes delicious. In the lemon lime flavor, they actually use real lemon and real lime. It's absurd. I haven't seen any company that cares more about their ingredients in the electrolyte space, and I think you guys will enjoy it if you try it yourself. If you would like to try it, you can go to livekaizen.com/align and you will get 15% off. That's live, L-I-V-E, Kaizen, KAIZEN.com/line for 15% off. Cheers. If there was one invisible belief that causes the most pain and suffering to humanity, what would that belief be?
That's an ancient one. It's the belief in the separate solo self, that we're disconnected from others, that we're individual, separate creatures against the world, and that loss of connection. Because if you had a connection with the world, if you connect with humanity, would you give them bad food? Would you give your own child bad food if you love them? Would you pollute the earth? Would you force the Mexicans to grow terrible corn that makes them diabetic, as opposed to the indigenous corn, which was very healthy for them? If you connected with these human beings, would you do that? So that it's this belief in the separate solo self, which has been with humanity since civilization, like we said earlier, but it's reached this apotheosis, its highest level under current capitalism, where it's all about the self. We go around taking selfies all the time, Ugh. What do I look like? And how many followers do I have, and how many people liked my most recent comment? And so it's this belief in what my colleague and friend Dan Siegel, a psychiatrist, calls the lie of the separate solo self.
Mm-hmm. I've heard something along the lines, I think probably from like Ram Dass or something, but the mind can exist in a place of scarcity and say like, give it back. And the heart says, give it away. And I feel like the body doesn't exist in a place of scarcity or fear or threat. It can express that in an acute way. But it doesn't exist in those kind of like malignant, chronic, stress-based patterns. If you're a person who's able to tap into some sensual experience, be it dance or some kind of sexual experience or you're at a concert or you have a runner's high, like you're in your body. I feel like those moments are very grounding in kind of like a capital Y you, like it feels like a more authentic version of the self. And I think the more we disassociate from the body, the more we can be in kind of bound up and trapped in the mind. And the mind is where all of those thoughts of contraction and fear and resistance and shame and doubt and all that can exist. And it seems like in your book, The Myth of Normal, what we consider to be normal now actually is kind of a chronic state of disease. And it seems to me like a big part of that is a transition away from embodiment.
What you said can be true, but it all depends who's experiencing those moments of transport. Because you can have sex, like some of Epstein's clients, with underage girls.
That's a great point.
That's not going to enhance their sense of truth and connection.
Great point.
Make you can go to a rave and rave over the music, but if it's simply an escape from your reality and you're using it to soothe your pain and not be aware of what's really going on, then it can be a negative experience. So no external activity by itself will guarantee that kind of meaning and peace that I think you're talking about. It depends on who's engaged in those activities, with what intention and with what attitude. Yeah, you can have sex that's beautiful and it's a connection, and it's really a momentary loss of a separate self. But you can also have it in an exploitative and hurtful fashion, hurtful to the other and hurtful to you, as we know.
So it's just a matter of attention more than the actual action itself.
Attention and intention.
And intention.
Yeah, who's doing this and for what reason? And with what, with what intention? And what kind of consciousness? The karma they talk about. You can have two people giving $1 million away. And from the outside, it's the same activity. For charity. No. That $1 million will do good. Doesn't matter who gives it away. If you give it to the right, institution. But the individual who gives it away in order to look good and to get praise and recognition, or the individual who does it anonymously even, just because they want to support humanity, they get a very different karmic response or karmic effect. So it's not just what we do, it's what we're doing who we are when we're doing it.
What does unconditional love actually look like from a parent to a child?
Well, actually, it was the American psychotherapist Carl Rogers coined the phrase unconditional positive regard. And if I can quote him from memory, he said it's a regard that doesn't depend on any attributes. So it's not because you're cute and cuddly and compliant. It's just is unconditional. And I accept you exactly the way you are. So that unconditional love is unconditional acceptance, actually.
Can you unconditionally love a child without unconditionally loving yourself?
I've seen it, but it's rare, very rare. And where I have seen it, it was on a part of a very self-sacrificing, self-suppressing woman who ended up dying of an autoimmune disease. Not because she unconditionally loved the child, but she did. And her children tended to be wonderful people. But because she did not unconditionally love herself and she suppressed herself. But that's a very rare example. Mostly, the answer is no.
If a person experiences anxiety or depression or a sensation of a lack of acceptance of their life or their experience or their body, is that always rooted in some form of trauma?
Well, most of the time, I mean, look, if I was a child in Gaza and I'm being bombed and my family has just been killed, and there's no medical help because they don't let in medical help, and my limbs are being amputated without anesthetic because they don't let in anesthetics, and if I have discomfort, no, it's not because of trauma or past trauma and unresolved issues. So I don't want to be, and there are a lot of people in the world, millions, who suffer around the world for no fault of their own and not because of their own internal dynamics. Let's just keep that in mind. But in this culture, those of us that are privileged enough so that we're not lacking the basic necessities, then much of the suffering that we experience is because of unresolved stuff. The anxiety, the depression, and that anxiety and that depression, again, began when you were very small. And like, look at the word depression. I'm going to ask you a simple English question. What does it mean to depress something?
Pull something down.
Push something down. What gets pushed down in depression?
Feelings.
Sorry? Feelings, yeah.
Emotions, yeah. Feelings.
Exactly. Now, no infant is born pushing down their feelings. You've never met a 1-day-old that knows how to push down their feelings. Whatever they feel, you're going to hear about it. But once you get the message that your feelings are not acceptable, and this goes back again to our first question, then in order to survive, you push down your feelings. And then 20 years later, you're diagnosed with depression. You got this disease. Well, actually what you got is a response to the environment. And that's part of the answer. And that's why I called my book The Myth of Normal, because a lot of what we consider disease in this society are normal responses to abnormal circumstances. From the point of view of human evolution, it's abnormal for a child to have to push down their feelings. It's not normal. It's not how we evolved. So what we call disease is very often a normal response. I mean, take it something like post-traumatic stress disorder. Something wrong with the individual. No, there isn't. Nobody gets post-traumatic stress disorder sitting in a room by themselves. It happens in interaction with other people. And the symptoms of PTSD are perfectly normal responses to abnormal events. Just to be blown up or have your friends blown up next to you, or to have your mother raped by your father or beaten up in front of your eyes. So the PTSD is a normal response to abnormal circumstances. So, yeah, these diagnoses very often do represent the impact of abnormal experiences.
We can wrap up here because I know you have things to tend to and such. Is there any rush to heal? Well, it seems to me like the world, like people go and seek out retreats and do, maybe an ayahuasca retreat is like a more apparent one. And my feeling is that life is an ayahuasca retreat, and life will naturally open and expose you to the aspects of yourself where you're holding baggage, and in the form of a relationship or some type of catastrophe or something of the sort. And then an ayahuasca retreat is like, if life was an accordion, it's like the accordion compresses temporarily for a span of a weekend, and then it kind of expands back out. But my feeling is life will continually kind of massage away the aspects of baggage that we hold that are shrouding us from authenticity. What do you think about that? Is that crazy?
Well, I completely agree with you. In the Myth of Normal, here's a copy of this is the Canadian paperback, The Myth of Normal, and there's a chapter on actually on an ayahuasca experience that I had in Peru, where I really had this expansion and almost a communion with something way beyond me. Yes, and 2 months later, like it never happened, because I didn't integrate it into my life. So these experiences can be openings, but the real work is in real life. It's in our relationships, to ourselves, to our spouses, to our children, to our parents, to our friends, to the world. That's what the real work is. And you're right. Life is a ceremony like that, and it gives us all these opportunities, and not just opportunities, but also these knocks on the head that try to tell you, look, you better pay attention to something. So, and people are in a hurry. They, it's a do-it-yourself, do it fast culture. And no, healing is a long-term process. Some people will have powerful experiences that changes them. I'm not one of them. For me, it's been a long, ongoing process, and a continuous one.
Yeah. At the core of all, this is the last question. At the core of all of that, if one were to drop all of the baggage and release, process, integrate all of the impressions of, wounding or trauma, what is at the core of the human?
Love, the need for love, actually. The need to be loved and the need to love. That's at the core of it.
What does that look like and feel like in the body?
You want me to put that into words? Have you experienced it?
Yeah, to the degree that I believe I have.
Can you put it into words?
Surrender, ease, expansion, spaciousness, exuberance,
joy.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then that's what it looks like.
Yeah. Do you believe that in the looking for it, a person can push themselves away from something, and it's the it to look for is more of just like an allowing?
Well, spiritual teachers would say that the looking for it is already a rejection of yourself, because you're saying that you don't have it when actually you do. We get that. But I think it's one of those paradoxical things that how I get through that is basically not so much to look for something, but to notice when it's not there and to see what's in the way of it. There's actually a great quote by the poet Rumi, the great Persian poet Rumi, who said that, I'm going to quote him right now. He said, your task is not to seek for love.
Yeah, remove the obstacles.
But merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it.
It's my all-time favorite quote. I have it written down all over the place. I think it's a perfect quote.
Yeah. Well, there you are. I've given you
There's nothing to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's not quite what he's saying in my understanding. He's saying, look at the barriers you've built.
Yeah.
Don't look for the love. Look at the barriers against the love that you've built.
There's nothing to add.
Nothing to add. That's right.
Yeah. But then this kind of comes back to like Vipassana logic and such. It's like you already are enlightened. You already are all of the things in this exact moment. The only thing that stops that, which is perfectly fine and beautiful, is just the the lack of acceptance of that in some aspect. It's like a lack of acceptance of God. It's like, I don't want to believe it.
That's what they tell me. And as soon as I explain, I believe them. And as soon as I explain it, I'll let you know.
You're one of my, I mean, you're probably this for a lot of people, you're one of my, my preferred humans on the planet. I really appreciate your authenticity and your kindness and your generosity. And, you to me are a genuine elder. And,
I'm genuinely old. If you're saying I'm genuinely old, I really am.
No, you're like in Western culture, elders is kind of a thing it's not as, in a lot of cultures, it's like, oh, the elder. It's in Western culture, we kind of miss that a little bit. And I think we're confused in a lot of ways. And there are a handful of people on the planet like that. I just got to have a conversation with Alex Gray last week, and Rupert Sheldrake, another guy that I think big fan of, a few weeks before that. And to me, it's just an amazing honor to be able to get to like share conversations. So I really genuinely just admire, respect, and appreciate you very much. And
thank you. It's always a pleasure to be with you, and I appreciate your openness and your curiosity, actually, and your willingness to self-reflect as we talk. That's great. Makes it very different from a Q&A.
Oh yeah. Do you feel fulfilled? Do you feel like you're as accomplished as a human being can be on the planet in the realm of like your path?
I'd answer that with a yes and a no. If I were to hop the twig tomorrow, as they say, I know that the work that I've done and the legacy I've created, it'll live on much longer than I will. I know that. And I know how many people I've helped, but I don't know how many numerically, but I know that I've helped many. I get that feedback internationally from all over the world, appreciation and love and gratitude. And I believe in my own work. If nobody told me its value, I know its value. So on that level, yes. Number one. On the other hand, number two, as long as I'm here, there's still things to find out. And if I told you that I was totally fulfilled, no, there's still things I want to learn. One of them is about dying, for example, and how to relate to the prospect of death, which at my age is something at least worth pondering a little bit, and on a personal level, the piece that you talked about and described so beautifully, I'm not quite there yet. So maybe someday I will be, maybe I won't be, but there's an ancient Greek saying about count no man happy until they're dead, because you never know. So what am I saying? In significant ways, yes, and I've also had lots of love in my life and all that. At the same time, I think there's more to find out. As long as I'm alive, there's more to find out and more to experience.
I really appreciate your honesty and everything. It's very, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for making time to have these conversations. It really means a lot. And I think it's very meaningful for lots of people. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your time. That is it. That is all. We'll see you all next week. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed that episode, you might also enjoy this episode over here, as well as this one over here. Thank you for subscribing. Appreciate you. I'll see you in the next video.